We're live again. Tristan,
There
thanks for coming on, man.
Round two twice.
Yeah, there we go. You're in sunny Wyoming. What area of Wyoming?
Sunny Wyoming, central Wyoming. It's a small town called Thermopolis, and yeah, got outside here. Sun is shining. It's let me check, 37 degrees out, but 34. Sorry. I try and maximize the sun exposure, so taking meetings outside. I usually do podcasts inside, but I realized that I could shoot all my wires through my window to my deck. So I was like, this is definitely better. And yeah, it's all about getting the sun in wintertime. And the good thing about Wyoming is, you know, it's quite sunny even in the winter. But this winter has been very abnormal. It's been extra warm and extra sunny. So I think I'm literally tanner than I was like last May, to be honest, which is great.
I literally got a tan on Monday this week, and it's kind of funny. We can go into that a little bit more detail. But like I've been told my whole life that I can't get tan and that I can't that I'll be pale and burn and all this stuff. And I went outside for a while the other day, and it was probably 55, 60 degrees in a bright sun, and I got a tan for sure in February. And I've never thought that I could do that in my entire life until this past year.
Yeah, I mean, I got like a tiny bit of sunburn, pink skin, then turns to tan like last week of January, just because spending hours outside on my deck working and then, just exercising outside. And that was before UVB even came back. So I couldn't even make vitamin D and I was still getting tan. So that just goes to show you the importance of building up in the wintertime. And again, we're both white European descendants. Like the U.S., especially the Rocky Mountains, we have way higher sun exposure here than in Europe, Central and Northern Europe, that's for sure. So we're already in, I guess, an ancestrally improved state of geography in terms of sun exposure, which is fantastic.
Yeah, what do you have to say to the folks that are like, Tristan, dude, it's 34 degrees. Go inside, man. What are you doing?
Dude, the sun makes a massive difference. I think I'd take 30 and sunny over like 45 and cloudy. I actually think it feels warmer when it's 30 and sunny. So that, just radiation, a lot of the infrared spectrum getting directly on your skin is going to have a massive heating, component to that. But also I've been really embracing cold and seasonality this entire winter to a higher degree than ever before in my life. So to me, like 40 and sunny is quite warm. Like I'm sitting out here 34 and sunny and a t-shirt, but I'm direct sunlight, and it's only going to get warmer over the next few hours. And it's just a testament to kind of embracing seasonality, which I think is one of the most underrated aspects of health, and especially when you live in an environment, a location that is very seasonal. And then you also have a background that's, like I'm saying, kind of Central Northern European descent. You're built to adapt to the seasons. We're built to change, and I'm embracing it, and I love it.
That's awesome. No, before we started talking, we were talking about like podcast studios and how a lot of them, I don't even know why, maybe for acoustics sake or lighting's sake, but a lot of them are super insulated from light, from natural light. And obviously one step above that would be have windows and hopefully open the windows and natural light and things of that sort. The penultimate would be what you're doing, is doing a podcast actually outside, which I've done a couple podcasts in person outside, and it's better. But I want to kind of stem that to the first question. I had ADHD growing up and got diagnosed when I was in high school after sitting in classrooms in the basement of buildings with no natural light, under blue light 7 hours a day, listening to fat teachers talk about things I gave zero cares about at all. And they said, hey, look, you have an attention disorder. You should take meth, pretty much. Is there a link between blue light and focus in children and focus in general, I guess, for adults?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the ADHD, especially for young boys and just males like ourselves, it's something that has been like so demonized. But you have to understand, really, like we're built to be outside, and as men, we're built to be very physically active. And I noticed that, especially when I get a lot of sun exposure or I'm in nature, that's driven up to an even higher degree. So yeah, and you'll have to let me know if it gets a little too windy here, the downsides of living in Wyoming. But hopefully this mic is good enough. But yeah, there's certainly correlations with, you know, attention span and blue light, especially from the artificial side of things, right? Like, in order to understand why blue light is bad, you have to understand the difference between artificial lighting and sunlight, because blue light is actually not bad when it's in the context of full spectrum sunlight. So when you get exposed to full spectrum sun, you're getting a whole swath of wavelengths. You're getting all the colors of the visible spectrum, and more importantly, you're also getting infrared exposure. So sunlight is never present without red and infrared, and actually makes up the majority of the sun energy that's hitting the surface of the earth is red and mostly near infrared. So that's right on the cusp of like where we can't see the light, but you can feel it. You can feel the heat radiating. And this is why things like photobiomodulation, red light therapy panels have become very popular, because these wavelengths are very, you know, stimulating to our mitochondria. They're very healing, you know, great for skin health, great for hair, all these things. Great for our, you know, intracellular and biological water. But again, even the red light therapy devices are artificial lights. Why is that? Because they have very isolated wavelengths. So be like, all right, this red light therapy device is 600, you know, 80 nanometers. It's 720 nanometers. It's 620 nanometers. That's one wavelength. When you get sunlight, you get every wavelength from, you know, 280 nanometers to 3000. So every single, you know, photon in that range is hitting your body, and it depends, of course, on the, you know, time of day, the sun angle. So like the UV spectrum is not coming up until 10 degrees above the horizon with UVA, ultraviolet A, and then UVB, which I mentioned kind of earlier, which is required to make synthesized vitamin D. It will only be present when the sun is above 30 degrees above the horizon. So in the winter time here in Wyoming, that's absent for like 2 months. So you can't make vitamin D for 2 months. Then blue light. Blue light is present pretty much right, you know, at sunrise, but again, it's never present without red and infrared, and it's always in this kind of like 3-to-1 balanced ratio. And if you want to study this more, you can look up the work of like Scott Zimmerman and Russell Ryder. They write a lot about near infrared and red light and the major benefits from a health perspective, such as stimulating melatonin production in the mitochondria. But that doesn't matter. What matters is sunlight is never present in isolated frequencies. It's a broadband emitter of light, whereas lighting, so back to your question of like fluorescent lighting, LED lighting, they have very narrow spectrums of light. So they'll be like really high in the blue frequency range, you know, and the wavelengths, I should say, maybe like 440 to 460 nanometers, big spike, especially for fluorescence. And then they kind of taper off as they get closer to the red and infrared, and they pretty much have no red and infrared. And a big part of that as well is because of the energy efficiency standards, right? So when you go into a store, what is the first thing you see on a light bulb package is how energy efficient it is. And this is also a problem with glass, and we can get into that as well. But basically, you know, infrared is a source of heat, right? So that's why we feel a lot of the, you know, heat on our skin when we're in sun, or when sun hits a building and it warms up. That's mostly due to infrared. It's partially due to the other frequencies of light as well, but it's mostly due to infrared. So energy efficiency, if you have like a really hot area, like if you're down in Texas or Georgia or, you know, the southern part of the US in the summer, and you have sun and you have lights that are generating infrared heat and light, you know, you're going to warm up the building quite a bit, and that's going to be a bad thing for, you know, the requirement of energy to cool it down. But in the wintertime, like here in Wyoming, it's amazing. You know, the temperatures are around like 30 to 40 degrees past couple weeks, and I barely turn my heat on, but just the heat from the sun is keeping my house at like, 55, 60 degrees, which some people think that's insane, but that's me embracing seasonality. So again, that's why lighting has become so demonized, and that's why we've gotten to this very narrow band, isolated approach. So when you get that, you just get a very distorted spectrum of light, hitting your biology. And our biology is not tuned to accept blue light in an unbalanced ratio that would naturally be coming in sunlight, like I mentioned. So many things are happening from blue light. It's altering, dopamine reception in the brain. It's damaging like your eye health, like staring at screens. It's very damaging to your retina. It can also damage other photoreceptors in the body. And we know that, the eyes is really the main input signal for light, and light is driving, it's the most upstream input to our biology, that everything is cascading from light signals because our body's fundamentally electromagnetic. And really what that's causing, it's causing, behavioral issues. It's causing just neurotransmitter imbalance and dysregulation from altering dopamine, serotonin, and also the lack of sunlight. So it's a combination of the artificial light spectrum that we're being exposed to, especially as children, and then the lack of full spectrum sunlight. So it's kind of like a two-folded sword that is really damaging childhood development. And how can we, see this as like a definitive proven thing? Is just think of all the mental health issues we have in young children today, and it was a combination of putting kids in school, but when they started changing the lighting, and then when we started giving everyone screens, technology, iPads, computers at whatever, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, when their brains are, so underdeveloped, they're far more susceptible. And something I actually read recently as well is that when the retina is not fully developed, so in younger children, it actually lets a higher percentage of blue light through, like 15 to 20% higher blue light is getting into the eyes of young children compared to you and myself who are, fully grown adult males. And that's making them even more susceptible. And then you get into like the biology piece of their body size. So when I look at like my phone screen, I'm holding it like an arm's length away from my head, just naturally here. So that's like the length of my forearm. A kid who's like 3.5 feet tall is gonna be like this. So they're actually like 4 times closer. And guess what electromagnetism is all about? It's all about distance of exposure. So if you're 4 times closer, that's a 16x increase in the intensity of the field. So the intensity at blue light is 16 times higher if that phone is 4 times closer to their face. So you add all of this up, and then you see the cognitive changes, the social behavioral changes, the mental health crises, the metabolic dysfunction. People don't realize that blue light, it's a stressor, right? What is the main function of blue light in our biology? It's to regulate our circadian rhythm. So our circadian rhythm is mostly regulated by blue light, because when we get up in the morning, that is what's triggering our brain, our pineal gland to release cortisol, which wakes us up in the morning, and melanopsin, which is the photoreceptor that's sensitive, specifically dialed into blue light, is kind of like the main clock setter, the main circadian signaler, and that's where blue light is having its effect. So that's a good thing. Cortisol is stress hormone, right? People know that. We need that in the morning to wake up. That's how you get up. You have energy in the day to tackle whatever you need. But when we have a dysfunctional society of artificial light, artificial EMFs, constant stimulation, we're getting stress hormones like all day long and then at nighttime. So the artificial blue light at night, tremendously damaging to sleep quality. And then of course the circadian rhythm, which is all upstream to pretty much all of biology. So to get back to your question, it's a stress hormone, it's a stress, and that is also raising insulin and blood glucose, and then you get metabolic issues from there. But 100%, it has an immense effect on the neurocognitive development of children, the behavioral issues of children. And I see this firsthand, like with my nephew, who's 2.5 years old now. He's like going to daycare, and my sister partially is working there, and she's like, if you take the kids outside versus when they're sitting inside, the behaviors are night and day. And it's just, ask any 4-year-old, what do they want to do? They just want to go outside and play. They want to have bare feet on the ground. They want to be in the sun. They want to be able to run around. Putting kids in schools, which has been ongoing, since probably the Rockefeller school factory model in the early 20th century. But then we coupled changing the entire light environment on top of that, and now we have this disaster of childhood behaviors. I mean, everyone is so low dopamine under the age of 25. It's tragedy. And behavioral issues, digital babysitting with devices, the list goes on and on and on. And that's why I'm really passionate about what I do, because I'm really concerned about the children and the next generation, because obviously, that's what's extremely important. And right now, unless there's drastic change in the way we raise our children, the way we educate them, and the environment that we all are living in, they're not going to be able to have children. They're not going to have the mental stability to run a country, to innovate, and to improve and continue to progress society forward. And that's just the truth.
Man, that's so much to unpack there, because I'm reminded now that you mention it. So first off, you take the kids out of school. Like me, for example, I went from being outside and only wanted to be outside. I literally just wanted to move around, play sports, build things, go hunting, fish. Literally, that was like all I did or wanted to do. So you go from that, then you put the kid in classrooms. So that's the first step. They're no longer directly experiencing sunlight in all the wavelengths. And then it's fluorescent LED blue light bulbs with, I remember a classroom specifically, multiple. There was not a single window. Like, I'm spending an hour plus a day, every single day in this room with brick walls and blue light all around me. And then you give kids screens, which is even worse. And then exactly as you mentioned, like the younger the kids are, the more it's closer. So it's even more exacerbated. Then you think about, hey, what's going through that, the entire building, all these Wi-Fi, Bluetooth technologies everywhere. So you have all this immense, these toxins, and it to me it's like, no wonder. And then when you go back to like how I actually got tested for ADHD, they put me in another basement, and then it was at this psychiatry practice, put me in a basement, had me like listen to these noises and watch computers for like computer screens to see if one button went this way and one button went this way for literally like 6 hours. And by the end of it, I wanted to scratch my face off, and they're like, yeah, you have ADHD. And looking back, I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, I didn't have ADHD. I literally just hated being in a basement looking at screen for 6 hours. And so, yeah, I mean, all that to say, I really appreciate like the passion that you have. And I think what you are doing is extremely important. And it's kind of sad to me, because I don't know. Do you think that it can be solved from a global society system? Or do you think it's just going to have to be a matter of like people that are actually seeking sovereignty, actively and intentionally, that are going to be able to save themselves from it?
Oh, that's a great question. But even to your point, right? And is ADHD, whatever that is that even bad, right? Like, I noticed for me personally, like all these, the ability to like, just track things or spot things out of the corner of your eye, like hunting, if we're talking about like being in the wilderness, these are advantages. And I know like Noah Ryan has talked a lot about that. I find that, and I just want to comment on that. I recently, this past weekend, went for 2 days. I booked a National Forest Service cabin and, sledded in all of our stuff. Me and my girlfriend, we were like, all right, we're just going to have a little EMF, like just in the woods, in the mountains in the winter for 2 days. It's going to be a great reset. And literally had to pull all their stuff, supplies on a sled, a mile in, and you just have a wood-burning stove in a cabin. It's no service, no EMFs, nothing. And I felt amazing. And then the day I got back, actually, I noticed my phone, I was like being pulled in way harder by my phone. It was almost like my dopamine, my serotonin, my neurotransmitters kind of reset to the way they're supposed to be in nature. And then the moment I had technology back in my hands, it like sucked me in so much harder. Like the next day I was like, whoa, I need to be like, back on track with like putting my phone aside to only work on my laptop. Like it's crazy how, if you took someone like an OG Native American or like, a tribes person and gave them like a cell phone, they would probably sit on it for 20 hours in a row. Like it's hardwired to be extremely addictive. So I just kind of wanted to comment that. And I don't think ADHD or ADD or whatever attention deficit disorder they give to young males, it is not a bad thing at all, and you can utilize that in the context to your advantage. So I definitely appreciate that, and I think in the context of like hunting and being outdoors, it's massively important. And
can I interject real quick on that?
Yeah, let's go.
First off, I totally agree. Noah actually was really pretty instrumental once I started consuming his content and reading his writing and talked to him on the podcast twice now. He really like that whole reframe. I'm like, oh wait, that makes so much sense. That's why I do this better than other people. That's why I do have I'm more athletic than other people, or not like comparatively, but like I can pick things up physically. I'm very like audibly attuned, meaning like when I focus, I have to have earphones in if I'm not in a quiet area, or I'm going to be like constantly, what was that? And you're exactly right. If I'm hunting and I'm needing to bring food back for my family, that's a massively advantageous adaptation. Massively. You can't even overstate how much that would be an advantage to you and your tribe. And then the other thing about your phone, do you know Nick Sweeney, right? Bass Bra?
Yep.
So he was talking to me, and it might be on our podcast conversation, I'm not sure, but sort of on the same note, like how it feels like everything that's new is intentionally designed and engineered to have us sucked in as much as humanly possible. And it's so almost overwhelming. And his example was this. This is obviously hypothetical, but I really do think it proves the point, and it's worth discussing or considering. If you took a monk from like 1900 from China, and he's been meditating for 40 years of his life, like just being zenned out, and you stuck him in a room with a smartphone with access to social media, unlimited porn, all the YouTube, whatever else. Nick's proposition or submitted that he thinks that person that monk would become addicted to the phone, just like everybody else, because that's how powerful it is. And I felt that was worth mentioning because I totally agree. It really is like even once you reset, you just are reminded almost how fucking addicting this stuff is.
Yeah, that's the revelation I had again, like this week. And I completely agree. I mean, our biology is like, we have all these reward systems, right? Like innately designed into our biology for specific reasons. And then now we have all these artificial, unnatural inputs that are just harping on exactly that. For example, is like we produce beta endorphins when we're out in the sun. That means we're naturally meant to feel good in the sun. When you get that feel good feeling, that's for a reason, right? It's because your body's like telling you to go outside, and we need the sun to drive optimal health. And now we just have such a conflated feedback system from modern technology, from all these non-native electromagnetic inputs, and our body is just like a mess with input signals, and that's what I like to talk a lot about. But back to your question is, what does solutions to these issues look like, and is this widespread? Is this even feasible? To be honest, 100% it's feasible, but whether that'll actually be accomplished at a wide scale or be very, decentralized in terms of how it gets implemented, maybe 5% of society will prioritize these things and it'll never make it into schools, hospitals, areas like this. That's probably like more likely to happen. I mean, at first it has to even start there, because all these people that are making technology, they have to admit that they're wrong, which is never going to happen. Technology, big tech is literally propping up the entire fiat economy, right? Like look at the S&P 500. If it wasn't for the tech companies, it would be nothing. It's pretty much like the S&P 10, with like Nvidia, Apple, Amazon. Like that's what drives the U.S. economy and the global economy at this point, right? And that's all propped up by fiat money. So what are the solutions, right? So just talk about lighting. You know, incandescents were great. They were a fantastic option. And why is that? Because they're broadband emitters. They're not LEDs, they're not fluorescents. They're actually, like tungsten filaments that release a broad spectrum, and they're actually very low in the blue and very rich in the red and infrared. But that makes them quote unquote energy efficient. So
Aren't
that's
they illegal
why
in some places?
No, now they're banned. Yeah, the standard wattage incandescents are banned in the United States. So, I mean, you might be able to get them at like your local hardware store or get like a low wattage version, but yeah, you can't buy them anymore. They're outlawed for energy efficiency, for climate change. We're going to save the world, yet we're destroying everyone's health. And even if they were legal, everyone's already made the switch over to fluorescents and LEDs in offices and things like that. So it doesn't really matter. So that's one thing is the lighting, like the lighting, actual indoor lighting environment. And it's such a problem because it's so distorted from full spectrum sun because of the spectrum of light. So it's very rich in blue, very, absent in red. And then also the intensity. So a lot of people don't talk about the importance of like brightness. So brightness is a measure of like photon density. It's basically like how much energy you're getting from the sun is like how bright it is, right? So on a super direct sun, clear day, you're getting, 200,000 lux, which is a measure of brightness. And that's why when you go from indoors to outdoors, you're like, oh shit, I can't even see because it's so bright. So from indoors, I mean, I'm just looking inside my house right now and it's like I have pretty big glass windows. The difference could be 100x, 1000x. So if you're talking about energy from the sun that you're missing out on, I'm talking like 100x difference for being outside versus being inside. So couple that with the distorted spectrum, that's a major problem. That's why people are so lethargic all the time. So how do we bring that back inside? That's a structural, engineering, a lot of Windows thing, could easily be done. And then the glass. The glass used to just be like single pane or double pane glass where, it reflects maybe like 5 to 10% of some of the infrared spectrum, some of the UV spectrum. It really depends on the glass. And I want to get a spectrometer to measure this because my house is quite old and I can feel the heat getting in my house.
Say that. Yeah.
So that's how I know it's pretty good from a letting in the light perspective. But now, because of energy efficiency, they have what's called low E or low emissivity glass, which blocks pretty much the entire infrared spectrum. So if you live in like a hotter place, like in Texas, for example, and you have a new building, all that glass is going to have a coating on it, which reflects pretty much like 90 to 100% of the infrared spectrum. So then you're getting none of that, but you're getting all of the blue. So instead of being a 3-to-1 ratio of like infrared, red to blue, you're now like, almost 100% blue. So glass has come, and the same thing on cars, windshields, like everywhere, indoors. So if you even have the benefit of having windows in a new building, it's still going to be a distorted spectrum. So we could easily, go back to better glass. We could easily go back to better lighting. There's some companies popping up, like Scott Zimmerman, for example, is making lights that are a combination of LED and incandescent that are still like energy efficiently approved by the government. But it's more of a full spectrum. So of course we can engineer better lights. We can have better glass. We could have better buildings, like outdoor settings. We could have more, open workspaces. We could have outdoor, gyms and cooking, areas. These are all like not that hard to implement into society, really. But, they like to shove us all indoors and, have us be very docile. And that's kind of a repercussion of this. And then, we have healthier alternatives for a lot of these things. We could use candles at nighttime or, there's red LEDs that people can buy for nighttime use that are far better than having a bright ass LED overhead light. Again, the angle of the light matters as well, because all you're trying to do really, like you can get into all this complicated spectrum stuff. All you're trying to do is copy the sun.
Yeah,
If you
that's
can
all.
bring the sun inside, that's all you're trying to do. So full spectrum, like brightness, all the wavelengths, the angle, you know, if it could change during the day, that would be fantastic. We're very smart. We can engineer all of those things. That wouldn't be very challenging, but it would be challenging because there's so much invested in the current supply chains, in the current manufacturing processes, and you basically have to start from scratch. And that's, you know, what I'm seeing talking to a lot of these companies, and, you know, recently joining forces with the daylight computer, which we can talk a little bit about, is having healthier alternatives to technology, right? So screens. Can we fix screens? Yes. And, you know, the company I just joined is doing exactly that. If you want to go check out the Daylight computer, and you should definitely podcast with Anjan, our founder. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I actually, I saw I guess your girlfriend had him on her podcast.
Yeah. And then
And
we
I
had him on
screenshotted his info,
Decentralized
yeah.
Radio. Yeah,
Okay,
we
cool.
had him on Decentralized Radio as well. Incredible story. Basically, and it ties in perfectly to this portion of the conversation, is he tried to, you know, market a healthier computer, healthier screen technology that's absent of blue light. It's distraction free, it's reflective, so you're reflecting sunlight, easily used outside, basically eye strain free. They even changed the control mechanism of the LEDs for at nighttime so that it's DC and not pulsed. So that's way better for, you know, reduced, there's no flicker. You know, myopia and then also eye strain is probably actually the most prevalent health issue in the world, and people don't even realize it. It's got to be like 90 to 100%. They'll say like, I think 50 to 80% of people have it, but it's really everybody who uses a screen. So that's all been addressed. But yeah, when he was raising capital initially, a lot of the trad venture capitalists laughed him out of the room of like trying to create healthier, less addictive technology. Why? Because their entire business model is built on the fact that we're spending more and more time on technology, more and more time on screens, and that's how they make money, on ads, on views, on, you know, promotional items, data collection. This is all part of the fiat farming model that big tech is using to, you know, have $1 trillion market cap, and everyone, you know, again, it's propping up the entire economy currently. So there's no incentive for a big tech company to make healthier technology, and they'll greenwash the shit out of you with, you know, blue light screen filters or like nighttime mode, and that stuff is bullshit. It doesn't even work. I mean, if you reduce the brightness and you do like triple click and have the phone fully red, yeah, like that can be helpful, but you have to go out of your way to do that. They're not really making it easy at all. They could make it so easy to just have an automatic setting that naturally tints like the exposure of light as the time changes. That would be so easy to implement, but they want that bright blue light in your face at 9 p.m. because they want you to scroll for 2 more hours and not go to bed. That's the whole point. That's how they make more money and keep you addicted. And then they want you buying the next iPhone, the next iPad, the next Google, whatever. Like, that's the whole point. Consumerism 101 is keep the customer coming back for more and more, and you know, over promising and kind of under delivering so that you get a little taste. You need the next gen every single time.
There is like, this is why I think it's such a, I go back and forth between like, we're fucked and everything's going to be all right, because like when I think about it from a global standpoint, I just can't, literally outside of like a global revolution, I cannot see how big tech, big pharma, big food, big government, big all, like the NWO, New World Order, more or less, I cannot see how that would ever actually revert. I just can't. And the reason I think that is because, as you mentioned, if 95% of the population says, oh shit, we got to become more sovereign, we got to become more vital, there's so much more to this life than being a literal slave making these companies trillions of dollars. If people were to find that out and like actually become aware of that, then it would be a revolt. So I think that the reason there's so much investment in the opposite of that, in making us more and more addicted and more sheep, is the alternative would be like a full-on war. And so that's why it's hard for me on that side. But then on the other side, I don't believe that we're supposed to be, I don't think human beings are global beings. I don't think, personally, I don't believe that you and I are supposed to even know what's going on in in Afghanistan. Like, I don't think we're wired for that neurologically. I don't think our brains can really comprehend in a proper way. I think we're local tribal beings at heart. And so the thing that gives me hope is like being sovereign over myself and then my community and my tribe. And in reality, that's how change happens downstream, is like a bunch of people do that same thing. They take this responsibility and they're like, you know what? I'm going to become more sovereign. I'm going to become more vital. Therefore, my family will become so. And then my tribe and my community will become so. And then we'll live happy ever after, hopefully. But that's a thing where I kind of balance. That being said, once again, like, I love what you're doing, because if everybody kind of said, oh, you know what, like, NWO is winning, it's what's the term where it's like too big to fail now? It's I guess that would be it. Like, it's too big to fail at this point. So I appreciate people like yourself that are like fucking really attacking that and like saying, no, there is an option, there is alternatives, you can live a better, more healthy, more vibrant life, and here's how and why. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about the daylight computer, though, if you don't mind. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, I can do that. I just want to kind of chat about that because it's really important, I think, what you just said. But to me, it doesn't really matter because I can't control what anybody does, really. I can only control what I do. And to me, the most important thing is having healthier alternatives, having opt-outs to the system. So, we have alternatives, we have opt-outs to where you can take sovereign control. I mean, you could argue like to the highest degree of, Bitcoin is owned by the CIA or some bullshit, or like, you technically don't even own the land you buy because you pay property taxes, whatever. Okay. If you're an anarchist to the highest degree, then, you're probably already game over, like you've given up. But if you're a realistic person and want to just become more sovereign, then you're going to have the optionality and thus the freedom to, have a better life, in my opinion. And everything you just said, I think everybody already knows. But guess what? 97% plus people, they're so low dopamine. I mean, what are they going to do? Like, yeah, they know there's all these viral videos online of, how evil BlackRock is, how evil Klaus Schwab is. But guess what? 95% of people are going to watch that and be like, oh yeah, this is such bullshit. Like, all right, I'm gonna go back to my job and smoke my pot and be a docile human being, because what are they gonna do? Yeah. Whereas then people like, yourself, myself, we're like, fuck this. Let's we're leaving the system. We're going to educate people. So number one, education is massive. If you don't educate people, they're not going to know that a problem exists. And then they're not going to know how they can mitigate that toxin, that problem, and have a better, healthier, more sovereign life. So that's big for me. And then again, building solutions, right? So we need the alternative lighting companies. We need, better food companies, and we need all of these things, better technology, right? Because they're not going to be built by the people that run, the systems now. So how many people are going to buy into that? Probably like max 5%. So I do think you're probably right that 90% of people are kind of like a lost cause because they're not willing to take the deliberate action to change their life, because they're so intertwined in the centralized system and their dopamine is so low and they've just been so captured that they think they're stuck and they think it's not their fault, which is partially true. It's probably not directly, but you have to take accountability and be like, I'm going to get myself out of this. I don't know where it's going to end up, but there's a better life for me on the opposite side of things. And if you don't, you're just going to be stuck in the rat race, and that's going to continue to degrade as, the fiat money continues to degrade. So what our parents had, 40 years ago, we can't have that for the same percentage of income. It doesn't exist. You can't have one person working, a decent job supporting a family of 4. That doesn't work anymore unless you're like the VP of, a Fortune 500 company. So that's the reality. So we have to get creative. We have to build solutions. We have to come together because we need some momentum in order for these things to at least partially succeed. But in order to be successful, they don't need to be, multi-trillion-dollar companies. They just need to have a community-wide impact. And, that's what it's all about. And like you're saying, I agree. The whole global economy we have in global world. I think of it from just an information perspective. Think of how bad our memories are, and think of how bad our knowledge of our local environment is, and our storytelling ability. It's because we're constantly bombarded by useless information on a daily basis. Oh, like this is going on in Ukraine, or that's going on in Israel or China. It's like that shit doesn't even matter. Like 100 years ago, all we knew was like what the newspaper told us, but we were experts in our local community. We knew everyone by name, their family, we knew their trades, we knew what plants were growing outside, what was medicine, what was poison, and we knew fantastic stories from previous generation and share that knowledge because that was imperative to survive. Now the survival portion is gone. Everybody can just be fat, happy, sitting on their couch. They're not going to die of starvation or some sickness really, but they have all this useless information that they're just being fed, and it's a giant distraction. So that's really the problem I see. Just as a rebuttal there.
No, I think I agree with everything that you just said. And I'm reminded of my baseball coach used to say, a hungry dog hunts best. And what did he say? Hungry dog hunts best, and something about like a full lion doesn't hunt, or something like that. But you get the point. Like a hungry dog hunts best, meaning when you're full, like what does a lion do after it eats? It goes and rests. Like, so when we're constantly satiated across every single metric that we could actually ever be satiated in terms of like sustenance. I won't call it nourishment or vibrance or anything, but like what you actually need for your heartbeat to continue going at a extremely pathetic rate. We have everything at our fingertips. There's really no question that the vast majority of human beings in the West, at least, can maintain life, not high quality life per se, but life at a very low cost to themselves physically, if that makes sense. And all that to say, like, I guess my question to you would be, say there's somebody out there, because I hope somebody that's listening to this is maybe in this boat where they're like, they work that job, they're always in blue light, they have gone to college, they did this, they've eaten this way, they work out this way, they wear these types of clothes, they use this type of technology, but there's like this tiny inkling, and because everybody starts somewhere, but there's this tiny inkling of like, okay, there's got to be more. But let me add nuance to that question, is like, to your point about, it's honestly, some of this is really not, a lot of it's not even our fault per se. Like, we've been bombarded by big corporations that are spending trillions of dollars, and the best minds in the world are invested in making this as addictive as possible and making us as docile as possible. Where does that person start? Where does that guy say, you know what, this is the first step that I'm going to take towards sovereignty?
That's a great question, right? And typically this doesn't happen until like something goes wrong in your life, health event, you lose all your money, or, divorce. I don't know, something typically bad has to happen. It doesn't have to be like that, but typically people are not going to be very committed or have the motivation to actually what we're saying is like longer term, you want to change like your entire lifestyle, right? Because your lifestyle is not conducive to happiness, to fulfillment, to what you want to accomplish, right? Whether that's, it's your job, it's your, light environment, your food environment, your social environment, it's everything. And that's a big ask. So what people can do to start is just like choosing one thing and be like, I'm going to do a deliberate thing to improve the way I feel every day, and make it one thing. And then just start there. And then after you feel better in like 2 weeks, just add more. For me, I'm on like a 6-year journey after I won too many concussions, and I'm still like constantly striving for improvements. This is not a race to perfection. It's not even possible. Like, we have so many, unnatural inputs and toxins in our environment. Like, being perfect in health, it's not even real. And that's not the goal. That's like pure neuroticism there. So whether it's, eating real food, or like getting an hour more of sunshine exposure, or like going to bed at a consistent time and turning off the screens at X time every night, these are all like pretty much low cost, easily accessible things you can do to improve your life, improve your health. And then you're going to have more mental clarity. you really just want to get the ball rolling, because once you get the ball rolling, the positive feedback loop works to propel you. So you need to first break out of the negative feedback loop you're in. And then I think the most important thing for people is not biting off more than you can chew in the beginning. But more important than that is like 5 to 10 year vision. What do you actually want your life to look like? Like, if someone gave you $5 million today, what would you do? What would you actually spend that money on? What do you want your life to look like in 5 to 10 years? Do you want to like have a homestead and like raise a family and grow your own food? Do you want to just, you know, be comfortable, like have a beach house, like spend more time outside? Do you want to become an author? Do you want to be like a professional hunter or content creator, like surfer, like anything? What do you want to do? If money was not an issue today, what would you do? And then most people will stare at you and they'll be like, well, shit, I actually don't know what I'm passionate about. I don't have many hobbies that really like bring me fulfillment and joy. Like, I just been stuck in the 9-to-5 grind, and, you know, Friday beers roll around. I hate my life so much. I just get drunk with my friends because I enjoy social interaction. And, you know, that's kind of how I live my life. And, you know, occasionally I go out to the beach or, you know, go on a vacation, and that's fun to blow off some steam. But what are you fundamentally passionate about? And like yourself, sometimes you're like, get back to your roots and you're like, yeah, I want to be outside. I want to be hunting or, you know, doing things and spreading this message and talking to great people. So it's like, okay, how can you work to achieve that? And then you come up with a plan. So I think working backwards from a vision is better than setting like annual goals. Like, annual goals to me have never really been productive or helpful. Like, yeah, I want to bench like 315 or something. Like, okay, like what is that going to help you like achieve? It's going to make you feel good. But really, I think the long-term vision is like, where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? And then you're like, all right, well, now what do I need to change in my life to get there? And the path is not going to be clear. It's going to constantly be changing and deviating. But if you have that picture of your life crystal clear and like the future, you're going to be waking up every day energized to get that. So that's what I implore people to think about is really, what do you want your life to look like? Especially if you're 20 something, you know, you have so much time to accomplish this, and the worst thing you want to do is let that time pass by and then wake up when you're 45 and you're like, oh shit, now what? Yeah. And I think starting off with simple, actionable things that are not high barrier to entry is the best way to do it.
That's awesome. And Alex Hormozy says something that I love. It's, don't focus on goals, focus on habits. Because as you said, what in the end, what really, like, okay, you bench 315 pounds, or hey, you run a triathlon or whatever it is, like, nice. You're literally going to go right back to being unpleased with yourself moments after that. So instead, focus on habits that allow you to live that life. So I love that advice. The other thing that I've thought about, and I've spoken about with several people, it's impossible to win a fight that you do not know you're in. That's something that's like very key for me, because I don't believe that most people understand that their attention is being warred over, like being fought tooth and nail, legitimate like battle. It's being battled for. And that's something that's helped me in certain times where I've realized, okay, if I don't be intentional, I will be a victim to I will literally be a victim to their plans, and I will be making other people wealthy while I become a docile, weak man, which is pathetic in my opinion. And then the other thing is, maybe you have. I have not talked to a single guy, at least women as well, but I haven't talked to a single guy that if I said, hey, if I could 10x your vitality, what would you say? Yes or no? Nobody says no to that. You know, it's not like anybody's out here seeking less vitality. So that's another interesting little game to play. But I totally love the vision idea. That's awesome.
I mean, I didn't know Hormozy said that, but it's spot on. And yeah, the vitality thing, people don't even know what vitality is. Nobody goes through life. Like, I wake up, I don't drink coffee, I don't drink any caffeines, I pretty much don't even take supplements at this point. I just wake up and I have energy and I go outside and I feel good. I mean, that's like vitality to me. Nobody even knows that. That's like foreign. I don't think there's many people that have that kind of condition, and it's really sad. And people are like, well, I feel pretty good, just need 5 cups of coffee, Adderall, and antidepressant medication to get me through the day. And it's like, what the fuck is wrong?
Yeah.
And you can't, it's just the reality of things. And if you tell them that, they're like, that's not even real. So yeah, it's tough to frame it, but I think you just need to encourage people and lead by example. And again, not be overwhelming. It's easy for me, especially, to be overwhelming to some people. But again, I always try and preach. It's like, start somewhere. Like, I've been doing this for years, and a lot of people in the health space have also been doing their lifestyle habits for years. You're not going to just do all that at once. It takes a while, and progression is the goal. Like, if you can be better than you were yesterday, that's all you're going for. And then that compounds. So just break out of it.
Yeah, the Adderall thing is so true. It's Gary Brecka said this. I don't know if you follow or have listened to Gary Brecka, but he was, I love this question. Steve Bartlett, I guess, the Diary of a CEO podcast host, asked him the first question of one of their conversations, or maybe the only, was like right out of the gate, why should people stick around for this entire conversation? And Gary Brecka said, because most people are operating at 40 to 50% of their potential. And I'm like, yeah, that's reason enough. Yeah, definitely. I think you're right, A. And B, I'm like, that I really do think that, myself included, like, that's kind of the game, is to like implement habits that get you closer to that. So I thought that was a really cool reframe as well.
Yeah, it's generous, maybe, for a lot of people. But
yeah, 40, 50%.
I mean, it's crazy, right? Like, I don't even know. Like, I realized that in the corporate world. Like, I wasn't even trying hard, and I was like, working not that many hours a week, and I was like exceeding expectations. Like, the expectations have never been lower. Like, the playing field is a joke. You're like, we're on easy mode, folks. Like, if you're in Mario Kart, this is like single star racing or whatever it used to be called. Like, the course is easy. We are in easy mode. All you have to do is like wake the fuck up and take advantage of the opportunity that 99% of people are zombies and are running on like 30 to 50%. If you take control of your health, you're deliberate about it for like 3 to 6 months, you can be head and shoulders above anyone. And the good part about this global internet, economy that we're in, is that you can make money, you can do things from anywhere with anyone. You can put yourself out there, immediately be connected to like-minded individuals that are going to lift you up, that are going to teach you skills, that are going to be your network. Like, it's incredible. I mean, for me, even I was on the health journey for a while, but it wasn't until I really put myself out there on social media and connected with like-minded individuals like yourself and everyone in our circle and sphere that really elevated me to a whole nother level. And then it's like you're motivated to continue to get after it and learn from your mistakes, but then use that life experience to keep going. So, I mean, it's wild. Like, it's literally never been easier to be in the top 1% of men from a physical perspective, from a health perspective, from a vitality perspective, from a financial perspective. It's literally never been easier. So if that's any motivation, I think that helped me like a couple years ago. I was like, wow, like the bar is so low. Let's go. Like, let's change this.
Yeah, it's nuanced because it's easy in terms of the level of competition, but there is sort of the nuance is that it's easy to do that, but it's the gravity is harder. But once you escape, or at least build momentum to get out of the gravity, it becomes much easier. And you also realize, what's the word? You realize how, not sad, but like how tied down so many people are by things that they have not once consciously thought about. One of those things, to segue into another topic I want to get your opinion on, is fiat currency, which is something that most people, especially until very recently, vast majority of people have never thought twice about. my question is, I heard you say something to the effect that fiat money is like the root cause of the destruction of the nuclear family. You want to unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, when the money is broken as it is right now, again, like our parents, our grandparents, the one income household was like sufficient. They could have a nice, 3-bedroom house. I mean, maybe even have a lake house or, a house cabin in the woods, go hunting or go swimming in the summer.
100%.
Like that was pretty reasonable to have on single household income. So that kept a very stable nuclear family unit, where typically the man was working and then the woman took care of the children and, cooked, cleaned, which again, I'm not underselling the importance of that. I think being a mother is probably the most important role in society. And that's also contributed to, behavioral crises, mental health crises across the board for children. And yeah, now because they, the messaging around like getting women in the workplace, but then also the fact that the money is broken, like straight up, many families can't make it on one income. Even, if you have like a family of 4 to 5 and you're making one person's making like $100,000, that's not going to cut it. Like it's just not. It's not enough money. You're going to be really struggling to get by. You're going to be behind. And we've seen rampant inflation. So as the dollar continues to degrade as it has over the last, 30 to 50 years tremendously, and since really the dawn of the Federal Reserve in 1913, but exponentially since we went off the gold standard in 71. That's just going to continue. And you see all these TikTok videos and Instagram reels. People are aware of that. They're starting to come around, but they don't realize how much the magnitude of the effect that it's had. And I mean, it's really created such polarization in, the gender roles of society, masculinity, the importance of masculinity and femininity, the importance of just being present in, a childhood setting with the family, and just the importance of the family unit being like a really strong, cohesive thing that holds together a group of individuals during tough times, installs disciplines, installs values and virtues that will set someone up for success their entire life. And I was fortunate to, I think have a lot of discipline, virtues. I think sports helped with that tremendously. But I don't think sports are probably the same as they were when we were playing them in high school and middle school. Like hard work ethic, these things were installed in me at a very young age because I wasn't like naturally super gifted. And then really just, I was probably one of the only friends in my, friend group that had consistent every day. We had dinner as a family. That was non-negotiable. And we spent time together, went on family vacations. A lot of my friends, they didn't have that. So that was just installed in my mind at a very young age. And I'm very thankful for that. And that's something that I'm really striving to achieve. So again, my long-term vision is, multi-generational at this point. I want to create a situation to where my children don't have to worry about that. My family doesn't have to stress about finances, and we can live and raise a family together in a strong family unit and install those virtues, values, homeschool, play outside, like all of that immersion in nature. That's really my main driving factor. And I think that's something you realize as a man, is that you want to start thinking multi-generational when you get to a good place in sorting out your own life individually first. But fiat money ruins everything. That's a book Jimmy Song wrote.
Is it really?
And I interviewed him, and he said everything from technology to education to food. I mean, there's examples everywhere, right? So it's true. It's 100% true, because when you degrade the money and inflate the supply by 6 to 8% a year over 50 years, no company can grow 6 to 8% a year naturally. It doesn't exist. So in order to beat inflation and the growth of the money supply and appease shareholders, investors, and everyone, you have to start cutting corners. So you have to ship manufacturing overseas. You have to start using lower quality ingredients. And you have to become an economy of scale in a global system and pay people, $1 an hour to snap together iPads and, put polyester shirts on a printing press. That's the only way this stuff works. And then you realize that, and you realize in this flight of like return to quality, wow, things are fucking expensive when they're done the right way in America. Like, that is real. It costs, $50 to make something in the U.S. of high quality ingredients or fibers, like a shirt or, a hat or a beanie, for example. And that's the reality of it. But your perception has been so manipulated. So the fiat world has held the cost of regular goods so artificially low because of the global economy of scale and the big centralized conglomerates, that when we actually see something of high quality made in the US, made homemade or in a great way, that we're like sticker shock across the board. And that's the reality of the world we live in. So money is certainly probably the major driving factor of everything. But you could argue that, 100 years ago, the average person had a lower quality of life. Maybe they're at risk of, starving or their kid dying at age 5 from an infectious disease. There's arguments to be had. I don't want to completely romanticize the past. Like, the past is pretty brutal. But now that we figured this shit out, let's get back to hard money, and let's get back to building things that are actually in line with the progression of society at the individual level, which hasn't really happened since the 1970s. And, people are like, oh, we innovated so much in tech. Have we, though? I feel like the iPhone is pretty much the same shit every year. It's just like slightly faster, slightly better camera. Like, there's no real innovation, and there's no incentive for innovation. That's why I sound like Elon Musk. I mean, I'm not a huge fan, but I'm not a hater of him. He comes in and shakes everything up, and it's like, oh my God, he's crazy. It's like, no, that's just what innovation is. It's like, yeah, actually, maybe we should change the size and the dimensions of a car. They all fucking look the same, and they do the same thing. Why? Because people are going to buy them whether you do anything or not. And that's fiat economy 101. And Bitcoin, I'm a big fan of. And hopefully
let's
that changes things.
What is fiat money? Like, what does that mean?
Fiat money is when there's a money of the country, the currency, that's backed by nothing. So it's not backed by gold. Fiat
means like by decree, right? Kind of just like because of. Like,
exactly. Yes.
So, yeah, it's like money has value because of the decree of the nation or whatever.
Exactly. So in 1971, we went off the gold standard. We went fully fiat. That's what happened.
And since then, basically, it's gone to hell.
Yeah, purchasing power has dropped off a cliff. Everyone, what WTF happened in 1971 is a great page. You can check it out. Like, household income versus like median house price is like completely gone in separate directions. Like, productivity of the workplace, like literally everything. I mean, and there's so many metrics you can't even really quantify, like innovation and just quality of life, happiness. It's all gone very much downhill since 1971. We have gotten a lot of good things, but again, now we're at this weird point where most people, like you said, actually are becoming knowledgeable that the money is broken. And we're going to be in this like weird transition period, I think, for a few decades, where people are going to have the opportunity to take control of their life and live a better life. And then simultaneously, the government is going to try and take more control of your life if you don't opt out, because that's the only way they can keep the fiat Ponzi spiel going, is via increased control, via forced consumerism, and all that nonsense. So Apple Vision Pro, here's your happiness. You won't be able to go to, you can't go anywhere anymore. You can't go to the beach, to Florida, to, the Caribbean. That's not in your sphere of possibility, but you can experience it with this Apple Vision Pro headset. So don't worry, you'll be happy.
Dude, that's like, this is what I'm talking about when I go back between like the whatever, that's the thing that keeps the beat in music, like back and forth. I just literally go back to oh my God, we're screwed. When I see that, like when I see people spending money on the Apple Vision Pro, I'm like, we are actually fucked. Like, that's when I'm like, dang it. But it's interesting because I'm thinking about my grandparents. My grandpa worked, my grandma did not. In the 1960s, they bought a freaking lake house, and they had a house. My mom, like she grew up going to a lake cabin, and single family. And he was middle class. He did well for himself over his career, but like at that time, he was middle class guy. Worked just him. My grandma was at home. They would go every summer to their lake house, and I'm like, that sounds awesome. You have to be wealthy to do that now. Like you have to be in like the top maybe 1%, maybe a couple percent, but like probably 1% to do that comfortably nowadays, which is wild. And I just never thought about it, which is why I wanted to ask you that exact question. I never thought about how that would lead to the demise of the nuclear family, because it's so true. It's the whole idea that like the people who control fiat money, maybe not the people directly, maybe, I don't know, but like the whole idea is that they want women to become more like men and men to become more like women. It's like there's no definitive roles in society anymore, when in fact the entirety of human existence we have had roles. And I actually, to go back to a point that you mentioned earlier, I was talking with a woman once about this exact topic about roles and like how motherhood's been degraded and things of this sort. And the woman mentioned to me like, I'm so much more than just a mom. I'm so much more than this. The word she used was like a mother or a mom. And I remember vividly saying, hold up. We need to figure this out here, and I need to like make this clear. I wholeheartedly disagree with you, because in my opinion, I really do believe there's no better thing. Like that is the pinnacle of femininity, in my opinion, of a woman's life. Like to become a good, virtuous mom. Like what else is there? I think that's the pinnacle. So I think that's where like the disconnect comes in, at least for me, where it's like women are being pushed to believe that there's so much more than this. There's so much more out there. So then they leave that behind, and all this shit entails. Once again, I just never realized how it actually stems back to fiat money.
Money, right? Money runs the world. Unfortunately, that's the case, and you can see evil just follow the money. But yeah, I mean, wholeheartedly agree, right? I mean, my mom, she, took off like pretty much 10 years to raise me and my sister, and I couldn't be more thankful that we had that opportunity. And you can't do that anymore, really. But it made me who I was today, installed a lot of virtues, values, and had a great childhood because of it. And my dad worked really hard to make that happen. So again, it's like that's the reality of sometimes what needs to happen is you play into the strengths. And we can romanticize the past, but the past is the past. That's not real anymore. So I think men who are out there, it's a weird situation, because now we have this whole like trad movement, and like some women are just trying to throw themselves out there and be like, oh, I just want to be a trad woman, and men who are a shell of a traditional man are like, I just want a traditional woman. I'm like, fucking, what can you do, bro? You can't do anything. So again, I think people need to focus on the present day and be like, yeah, okay, what are my strengths? You have to sort out your life as an individual before you could really like be worrying about that. I think that's number one recommendation. And then you'll attract, the energy that you put out into the world. So if you practice proof of work and want to live this lifestyle and have this crystal clear vision, you'll attract that person eventually. It just takes time and putting yourself out there. But getting so wrapped up into that, I don't think is very conducive to achieving the life that you want to live either. And
yeah, Jordan Peterson talks about cleaning your own room first.
Yes,
that's kind of exactly what you're talking about.
So it's massive. But yeah, interesting times, right? Like Bitcoin is ripping. It's a great alternative. I think it's the best alternative to opt out, even if it is getting bought up by BlackRock and say the CIA controls it. Well, at least you'll have some opportunity to make wealth. I don't believe that that's true, by the way, but we have no way of knowing, and I feel like there's always more detractors as the price goes up. So again, people are just upset that they're not along for the ride. But if you do look at options that are more decentralized, more outside of the system that's wronging everyone, then that's Bitcoin for me. And I'm very passionate about that, and educating people as well, because it can be a daunting thing to get into.
Yeah, sovereignty, like most of my philosophy in life thus far, I'm 24 and more or less an idiot, and like a lot of ways, but like sovereignty has been a guiding light for me. Like the word and the term, I've for some reason sort of always been adverse to like
Control,
just yeah
being
just
told what to do.
yes, exactly. Like teachers telling me, I just never liked it, and I don't know why. It's not that I'm like anti-authoritarian. It's not that I'm anti, um, like leaders, like in things, but I just fucking hated it. And so sovereignty has always been something that's like I've been drawn to. The idea of like, do you know the word? Do you know the etymology of the word weird?
I don't. I'm not a big etymology guy, but I'm fascinated when people are.
Well, neither am I actually. It's just like one of the only words I know the origins of. That and Tyro. But weird, the etymology of weird stems from a word that meant the ability to control one's destiny. So when you think about how that's changed and used nowadays, like, oh, that person's weird. And if I take a step back, I'm like, oh, yeah, I want to be weird because most people are fucking miserable. Most people, as you mentioned, take antidepressants and spend 12 hours a day on their screen and are fat and metabolically unhealthy and work jobs they fucking hate and live a miserable existence. So yeah, I want to be very weird. Like I want to be so anti that you don't even recognize me. That's an interesting paradigm shift, and kind of all to tie that into sovereignty, like the ability to control my destiny or the destiny of my family. To the degree at which it is possible. I think that's so important. And I mean, as you just stated and are stating, Bitcoin and really just decentralized finance in general is the key to that, or is a key rather.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. I don't know. I'm trying to remember before my brain injury, but once I lost control of like being able to do what I wanted to do, that just cemented it for me. And my mom kind of, yeah, I love my mom. She is a rebel. She does not like being told what to do either. So I kind of inherited that from her, and pretty much that's how it's gone. I think it's a fun way to be able to, you know, take priority in your own life. But yeah, as you're saying, the sovereignty spiel is kind of like a cornerstone foundation that really can change the way like you wake up every day and decide what you're going to do.
When you talk, we get into an echo chamber in Twitter, Instagram, our friend groups obviously mold to our beliefs and values, ideally at least. And you do get into an echo chamber by no fault of like the fact that that's how we are. We want to be like people that are like us. And when you step outside that and maybe you have a conversation with somebody on an elevator or in a taxi or whatever you have, it's like, oh, wait, like most people don't know that polyester is not good to wear. Most people don't know that excessive blue light is bad for you or processed food. And dude, even seed oils, like they're becoming mainstream, but it's like a lot of people out there still don't know the damages of processed foods and such. So my whole point is I've talked to some people about like Bitcoin and crypto in general, and they're like, yo, you need to be careful. Like that's like you can get scammed. And I just don't think they quite understand the magnitude of it. What would you say to that person that's like still skeptical of the legitimacy of something like Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a valid concern. I have a hot springs here in my town, and this is the exact conversation I've had with multiple people in my town, usually elderly people. They're like, yeah, I got scammed, or like one person actually, you know, left all their Bitcoin on BlockFi, and, you know, that went bankrupt. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what happens when you're in an unregulated space. I mean, you could say the same thing about the supplement industry, right? There's like no regulations there, and it's kind of the Wild West. But unfortunately, that brings bad players and scammers to the game. But like Bitcoin itself has nothing to do with you being scammed. It's, you know, the person who used Bitcoin as a means to get your attention, but the network itself, you know, is fully sound, hard monetary principles, scarce fixed supply of 21 million, you know, that's getting cut in half every 4 years. You know, there's now an exchange traded fund, so you can put your Fidelity or BlackRock IRA into Bitcoin. There's way more, you know, companies that make buying it, make custodying it a lot easier and safer. You know, Swan, River, Cash App, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, you have the option, right? Like we had what? How many years? 13 years, or sorry, 15 years to front run like Wall Street. Well, Wall Street's in the game now, and they're buying a shit ton of Bitcoin. So they see the value in it. I don't really think that's a good thing, but it's just the reality of the situation that we're in. So I would think that you would want a form of money that is not going to devalue over time like the US dollar. So I like to think of Bitcoin as savings, right? It's not an investment. It's not like a get rich quick thing. It's savings because it has sound economic principles to its monetary supply.
Yeah, and is that pretty much the primary problem that it solves?
Yeah, I mean, it's money, right? So before it can be like used as a means of exchange on a regular basis, it needs to be a firm store of value. So that's really the pitch of it right now, is like a really strong store of value. But yeah, it has a fixed supply, so they can't print more of it. It has a exponentially decaying issuance structure. So the amount that's getting put into circulation is getting cut in half every roughly 4 years. It's very easily transactable, and then it's fully peer-to-peer. So I can peer-to-peer. I can send you directly Bitcoin without having to go through a bank or a financial institution.
Yeah, that's awesome. And therein lies, like what you just said, when you get outside of the regulation and the centralized nature, like it's going to be scary. Like there's going to be people that take advantage of that. It's very much similar to the westward expansion of America, like in areas where there was territory and not actual law yet. Like it was literally the Wild West. That's why they call it that. There was no, and people took advantage of that. There was no law. That doesn't mean that the territory was bad. It just meant that there was bad actors in the territory, if that makes sense. Something I kind of want to switch up a little bit, because I there's a philosophy that I've been thinking about, or not philosophy, but like I don't even know what you call it. I don't know anything about it, but it has to do with mitochondria. Mitochondrial uncoupling. What the hell is that? I heard about that for the first time like a couple months ago, and I have no idea about it. But I've heard you talk about it in Vance and a couple other people.
Yeah, mitochondria uncoupling. Well, first you have to understand what the mitochondria is. So the mitochondria is basically this bacteria that is, symbiotically become a part of our biology. That is really the most important aspect of our biology, in my opinion, because it's where we take, input of energy from food and create biological energy, if you want to call it that. And really, it's stripping electrons off food and then using that to create a charge. Like it's basically like a battery. It's kind of like a capacitor, really, but for simplicity's sake. And there's a nano motor that it's basically building up a charge to spin. And apologies if you can hear the background noise. There's a cleaning truck going by. I don't know, is that too loud?
No, dude. I had a dude one time like 10 feet from me. I was doing a podcast outside, and he started using an angle grinder. So it's been worse.
Okay, cool. I'm just not sure how well or bad you can hear it, but basically it's building up a charge, building up a voltage so that it can power this miniature nano motor in our biology, which is in the mitochondria, and that motor is producing ATP, and then the whole system is also producing water. So ATP is not really the energy currency of our cells that people think it is, but it's still extremely important. Anyway, the mitochondria you can think of as mini batteries, mini capacitors in our body. There's trillions of them because there's hundreds to thousands in every cell, and there's thousands of these motors in every mitochondria. So there's enough voltage in our body that's the equivalent of 10 to 100 lightning strikes. It's incredible, and that's the difference between life and death, is really our mitochondria. And if ATP production ceases, if our mitochondria get to a certain point of mutation and failure, we have chronic disease, and then ultimately we have death. And uncoupling is the reduction in efficiency at which that motor is basically running, because all that energy is being used to run the motor, or it's being dissipated as heat. So most motors have some sort of efficiency rating, right? And that's dissipating heat. Well, the heat dissipation typically is just a waste of energy. Well, our body is actually a fully, closed loop system. So that heat is being used to monitor, regulate our body temperature. So in the winter time, your mitochondria become more uncoupled because you're exposed to colder temperatures. So they'll produce less ATP, but then they'll produce more heat. And there's multiple uncoupling proteins. They have kind of different functions as well. Some of them are used as kind of like relief valves, basically, to where if your mitochondria are kind of, you're revving the engine too hard, you're redlining your body, say you're exercising or something like that, you're producing too many free radicals, which can be damaging to cells, they'll use the uncoupling proteins as like relief valves. But the first uncoupling protein is typically what is dissipating heat into our biology in brown adipose tissue or like brown fat cells. So that's why it's really important to get cold in the wintertime. So I talk a lot about embracing seasonality because that induces uncoupling of the mitochondria. So you're basically telling your body that it's cold, I need to produce more heat to thrive in wintertime, not just survive. And that's why you see animals, you know, they don't put on more clothes and like they can shed their coat and all these things, but they can live in a wide range of temperatures. And that's because they're getting the full brunt of the input signals, and their mitochondria is able to adapt because of that. So your body will produce more mitochondria to produce more heat, and then it'll also become uncoupled so that it'll produce more heat per each mitochondria. And then that also has a genetic component. So your mitochondrial DNA is only inherited from your mother, also why women are extremely important. So you can thank your mother for the most important aspect of your biology. You know, your energy levels, pretty much your susceptibility to all chronic diseases is mostly coming from your mother. So I'm very thankful for my mitochondrial DNA. But yeah, that's going to determine your ability to uncouple, your ability to, you know, produce quote unquote energy. So that's why it's kind of foolish to compare someone who's like a Kenyan marathon runner who can eat like oatmeal for breakfast and then go run like a two-hour marathon to someone like me or you, because we're not built the same way. And guess what? If you put that person in Wyoming and it's negative 20 degrees out, they're going to be struggling way more than I am because my mitochondria are built to uncouple. His mitochondria are built to be very tightly coupled, like a fine-tuned Ferrari engine that is just cranking out energy. And then he also has way more melanin, which is a potent, you know, biological semiconductor as well. So
I was literally, my
it's
next
really
question was,
important.
how does
Yeah.
melanin come into play? That was literally, I was about to ask.
Melanin's fascinating, and it's it has this ability to, you know, be photoconductive. So it's the darkest pigment in the universe, and it can absorb like the entire electromagnetic spectrum. It still has like a peak absorption in the ultraviolet range, which most, I should say, biological semiconductors do, because ultraviolet has the highest energy like wavelengths of sun. But yeah, it can conduct electricity, and it can actually store charge to some degree. So it's almost like a biopolymer that can be used for battery technologies as well. Like there's a lot of research ongoing for that. And yeah, it's imperative. And you know, it's also a natural antioxidant and skin protectant from sun. That's why you get tan, because when you're in a lot of sun, you build tan, you build melanin, and then you are able to spend more time in the sun and protect yourself from, you know, the harsh high energy rays. But it's all a positive feedback loop, and melanin is so important for, again, that, you know, electromagnetic component of how we produce energy. And they still don't really know everything about it, but it has the ability to split the water molecule, which is really important in our biology. And yeah, it's kind of why it's so important to get out in sun as well. It's another reason why it's so important to get sun exposure, and that's why there's a whole host of benefits, from feeling better, feeling more vitality. Melanin is a huge piece of that, and it's also, you know, strongly tied to a lot of the, you know, signaling pathways in our body with leptin and things like that. But to me, the high level really is that our body's electromagnetic. The sun is the source of life because it's firing these electromagnetic waves at us. And, you know, melanin, the mitochondria are all electromagnetic signals and downstream things that our body is creating to function properly. But it's all about the environment you live in. So if you have really, really strong sun, like the Kenyans, they're at like, 8,000 feet at the equator. That's why they're so damn dark, because they're higher elevation and they're right at the equator. They're getting like 15 UV like all year round. And that's why they're able to be so tightly coupled, or that's why they have adapted to be so tightly coupled. And that's why they have so much melanin, and they could run for 2 hours at 4-minute miles. I mean, that's insane. But if you put them in the Arctic 400 years ago, they'd probably die. They don't really have the biological flexibility to survive in the cold and adapt. So that's why you see where the environment that these tribes, native people grew up in dictates their biological characteristics, it dictates their mitochondrial function, and it dictates like their skin type as well. And that's, to me, really the most important part of genetics, quote unquote, for health, is that aspect. And bio-individuality is huge, and it's under discussed. So it's something that's like, you might sound crazy telling people that if you're African American or African, you probably shouldn't live in Canada. There's not enough sun. You need a lot of sun, and that's not racist to say that. Like,
no, not at all.
If you're actually concerned about your health, you want to feel optimal, you need a lot of sun, because it's going to take you 5 to 6 times, maybe more, of sun exposure to produce the same amount of vitamin D as you and I, because we don't have the melanin, so we can absorb a ton of light. But then we don't have that semiconduction biological strength that they do from their melanin stores, or the melanin they have on their skin. So, and if we go to, 120-degree environment, me and you are probably gonna be like, fuck, it's hot. Like, I'm struggling to, I'm a furnace, dude. Like, I dissipate and produce heat like extremely, extremely well. So I don't do well in really hot environments for a long period of time. But I do damn well in the cold.
Yeah, I saw this study or heard somebody talk about whatever it was, how black people black people in whatever, in northern climates got significantly more negatively affected by COVID than, like, as a percentage, than white people, and by black people that were in more equatorial regions. And it's the exact same way. Like, vitamin D is so crucial to so many functions, especially immune function. And as you mentioned, like, the sun in the north just simply doesn't equate. And that's so funny that, like, people would even, because I understand you're like, oh, that's not racist, but people would be like, mentioning any like biological difference is labeled as like racist or stuff, like something now. It's insane. But you're exactly right. Like, you and I would not be able to go run a freaking 4-minute mile and or really live in general very comfortably at 120 degrees. Like, maybe we could adapt if we had shade and stuff, but like, it would be a miserable existence, more or less. And that's a pretty beautiful thing when you think about that, out, like, how incredible the human body is, especially over time. Man, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's the aspect of health that's been completely ignored, right? Guess what? The cookie cutter approach doesn't work, because we all have, different zip codes. If you live in Wyoming versus Florida, that's a drastic difference. And that's why we talk about diets. People are like, carbs are bad, carbs are good. Well, where the fuck do you live? Do you live in Canada in the winter? Okay, there's no oranges growing there. You need to be embracing seasonality and local environment. That's why you hear these stories of these guys that went and lived with like Inuits and Eskimos. They're like, they only ate carnivore and I've never felt better. Yeah, that's all they have there. It's snow 100% of the time. Like, of course they're not growing food. But if you live in Florida where bananas and oranges are growing, the UV is strong, like, you can get away with eating more carbs, and you're likely going to be spending a lot more time in the sun. And that's why you feel great when all the health influencers who move to the beach. Yeah, it's the easiest way to get healthy, because you're barefoot outside in the sun all the time. You can eat pretty much whatever you want, and you're going to feel a lot better. You have to be a bit more deliberate when you're in northern latitudes, and especially in the wintertime. Getting outside is hard. That's why I try to do this podcast outside. But yeah, multiple sclerosis, MS, ALS, there's diseases that you can see, like once you get above like a certain latitude, they proliferate. At the equator, they're almost non-existent. It's an electromagnetic issue. And like you said, you know, with Africans moved to, I think I've read one story about Africans in Detroit, like they basically had a whole host of chronic diseases that never existed before in this tribe of Nigerians, and then they all moved to Detroit. I think it was either autism or some other, you know, childhood disorder, and it was oh geez, someone's calling me, sorry.
Good.
It was you know, never before seen until they bunch of Africans moved to Detroit. I don't know if you've ever been to Detroit, but it's cold, it's cloudy, and it's nowhere near the East African Rift, which has like beautiful, abundant sunshine of UV 10 to 15 all the damn time. So it's so important. And to me, it's one of the biggest fallacies and issues with even a lot of the alternative health space, the diet health space, is context is absent. So if you have health influencers that you follow that you like, think of where they are and think of how that applies to your situation. They still can give you great advice, but copycat approach doesn't work unless you're in the same environment.
Man, that's so true. And that's one of the things that's refreshing about if anybody follows you or listens to you for any period of time, they understand how important that is to you. Like the seasonality, bio-individuality, and geographic understanding. Like, and that's so important, because even like tribes, like nomadic tribes back in the day, they would move areas to follow the winter and spring as well. And I'm sure that their diets would change to a degree. Obviously, many times they were following large mammals like bison and things of that sort. But that doesn't mean that in the summer, if they passed a place that was growing whatever, they wouldn't eat it. But that stuff wasn't around in the winter, so they didn't eat it in the winter. They would eat like all this different stuff that was growing in the winter, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's so fascinating. And when you think about the adaptability of the human body, it makes sense to me that when you think about like inputs, like all of our life is really just like our body just has a bunch of inputs, and then depending on those inputs, we get outputs. And when you put in inputs that don't make sense in the context of the other inputs that we're getting, a good example would be the blue light that we mentioned earlier. Like blue light in and of itself is not bad. In the context of only being a shit ton of blue light, it is bad. You can do the same thing with food, like eating something that is not congruent with the rest of the context and environment that we're in can be a toxin, whereas in another environment or context, it could be the opposite of a toxin, a nutrient.
Yeah, and I do need to hop here in a sec, but that's basically, as an engineer, how I think about things, right? If you want to align the outputs to your system, and we should think about things as a system, right? Like pillars of health. People are like, well, what are your pillars of health? Are we a building? Fuck no. We're like a very complex digital analog system that has a supercomputer in our brain that is driving like our entire biology. So if you want, you know, to think of the outputs of the system, which is energy, vitality, libido, like physical strength, cognition, go down the list. How do you optimize those outputs? Well, you have to optimize the inputs. And what is our biology designed to take as an input? That is where we need to return to the local, hyper connected approach of getting in line with nature and our environment, because we've been adapting. Biology has been adapting and built for millions of years. You know, humans specifically, maybe 1 to 2 million years, at least a few 100,000 years for sure. But all biology has mitochondria, right? So we're taking similar input signals that have been, you know, adapting since the Precambrian era. And we've never been more disconnected, and we've never had such levels of electromagnetic pollution from artificial light, from EMFs and all these things. And it's hard. But if you get aligned in terms of input signals, whether that's light, that's food, you know, that's temperature, oxygen, more secondary, you know, getting connected to the earth, you're going to give your body the right signals to know where it is, what time of year it is, and what energy it needs to produce for you to function optimally. And that's what it's all about. So when you introduce fake light, fake food, you know, toxins across the board, your outputs are going to be severely dampened, and you're going to have a dysfunctional lifestyle. So that's the way I think about it. And that's the engineering mindset I have, but it's kind of cool realizing how our body really is fundamentally electromagnetic, and everything in life is. Because without the sun, none of this would exist. And not even without the sun, without the perfect conditions of the sun, the distance, the conditions of our magnetic field, protecting us from the harmful rays of the sun that don't make it to the surface. Like, it's all electromagnetism, and it's all about, embracing that.
That's awesome. Well, I'll let you get to your meeting, man. I appreciate the time. I always say this. I've had a couple people on twice. I'm never going to do a third virtual. So the third one, hopefully we can do in person, man. So I'll have to come up to Wyoming next time you're in Austin.
I will be in Austin in April. I don't know if you're going to be back.
I will. Yeah, man. Definitely. That'd be awesome if we could do round 3.
I'll shoot you a text. We'll do it in person. It'll be better. Can rip it outside maybe. But I appreciate you having me on, Nolan. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise, brother. Have a good one.
All right. I'll see you.